$8.7 billion represents the total amount Trump reduced from the National School Lunch Program, justifying it with the claim that children are overweight already. Yet, when 11-year-old Emma Washington fainted from malnutrition at her Virginia elementary school, journalists uncovered that the diverted lunch funds were used to pay off Trump's Atlantic City casino debts. The bank transaction records were undeniable proof. The viral 61 seconds of silence during which Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett presented photos of starving children captivated the nation. The heartfelt testimony of the school cafeteria workers devastated America. The events that followed sparked the largest education protest in United States history, demonstrating that under Trump's leadership, gambling debts were prioritized over feeding children. This is the chronicle of those 61 seconds and the subsequent accountability that occurred. On November 3, 2025, at 2:15 in the afternoon, Emma Washington was sitting in her fourth-grade classroom at Rosa Parks Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia. She was trying to concentrate on the math worksheet before her, but the numbers kept blurring on the page. Emma had discovered a method for dealing with this. If she blinked her eyes very quickly and held her breath, the lightheadedness would sometimes fade away. This time, the dizziness remained. Mrs. Chen was lecturing on multiplication tables, but her voice seemed to emanate from a great distance. Emma once cherished mathematics and had excelled at it, being top of her class the previous year. That was before the school lunches changed, before breakfast became a memory, and before hunger became a permanent fixture in her stomach. The sensation was a constant gnawing presence that she could not possibly ignore. She slowly lifted her hand and said, "Mrs. Chen, I don't feel good." Her teacher looked up, a look of immediate concern crossing her face, as Emma had once been such a robust, rosy-cheeked, and energetic child. She was the type of student who always volunteered to help carry heavy items and never complained. Over the past 6 months, however, Emma had changed. Her cheeks were sunken, her clothes fit loosely, and she developed dark circles beneath her eyes that an 11-year-old should not have. "Do you need to visit the nurse?" Mrs. Chen inquired. Emma nodded as she attempted to stand, but the entire classroom shifted like a vessel in a storm. The events that followed would be recorded on the classroom's security camera. This footage would eventually be displayed in Congress, scrutinized by medical experts, and viewed by 47 million Americans seeking to understand the real impact of cutting $8.7 billion from school lunch programs. Emma took a single step toward the doorway, but her legs instantly buckled beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, resembling a puppet whose strings had been severed. The impact of her head against the linoleum was sharp and final. Later, 23 fourth-grade students would inform counselors that they would hear that sound in their nightmares. Mrs. Chen was shouting, "Someone call 911! Someone get the nurse! Emma, sweetie, can you hear me?" Emma could hear her teacher's voice, but she was unable to respond. The world had gone gray around the edges, closing in like a tunnel. She was vaguely aware of hands upon her body, of distant voices, and of someone pressing fingers against her neck to check for a pulse. The final thought she had before losing consciousness was that she should have eaten the food that they had thrown into the trash yesterday, despite its bad smell and how it made other kids sick. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes, and the paramedics found that her blood pressure was 70/40. Her pulse was rapid and thready, and her body temperature had dropped to 95.6 degrees. One paramedic, a veteran with 18 years of experience, would later testify that he had observed cases like this in developing countries, refugee camps, and disaster zones. He had never witnessed such a case in an American elementary school. The hospital's diagnosis was severe malnutrition, dehydration, and acute hypoglycemia. Emma Washington, an 11-year-old honor roll student and Girl Scout, had not consumed a significant meal in 4 days and nothing at all in 26 hours. Her body was consuming its own tissue to survive. When the doctors questioned her mother, Maria Washington, about how this could have happened, Maria broke down sobbing. She was working 2 jobs and 16 hours a day just to try to keep her 3 children fed after her husband deployed to Afghanistan. School lunch had been the single meal upon which she could consistently rely. Her children ate breakfast at school and they ate lunch at school. It was not much, but it was something, and it kept them going. Then the cuts arrived. First, breakfast disappeared, which the school said was due to budget constraints. Later, the lunch portions decreased in size. A sandwich became half of a sandwich. Fruit became optional, and milk became a luxury. By October, the cafeteria was serving what the lunch workers themselves referred to as prison food. This meant mystery meat, stale bread, and vegetables so overcooked that they had turned into a complete mush. Maria held her hands 6 inches apart, indicating this much food for growing children, for kids who are supposed to be learning, playing, and growing. When the hospital social worker inquired if Maria could afford to pack lunches, Maria laughed, but it was a sound completely devoid of humor. With what money? After paying rent, utilities, and gas for my 2 jobs, I had $93 left for food for 4 people for the month, which is 20 thrals per person, or 76 cents per day. You try to purchase lunch for 76 cents per day. I dare you to feed a growing child. Story might have concluded there as one more tragedy in a nation that was learning to accept the unacceptable, but Maria Washington did something that would change everything. She made a phone call to the local news station. Channel 7's investigative reporter Jake Morrison had been covering school budget cuts for months. He had focused on parents complaining about reduced services, teachers buying supplies with their own money, and schools eliminating arts and music programs, which was a standard austerity story, important but not exactly shocking. Then he received the call from Maria. My daughter collapsed from starvation in her classroom in America in 2025 because the president took her lunch money. Jake was in his car and arrived in 8 minutes. The footage he shot in the pediatric wing of Arlington Memorial Hospital would eventually win him a Pulitzer Prize. It showed Emma looking tiny in the hospital bed with IV lines in both arms, feeding her the nutrition her body desperately required. Maria was sitting beside her, holding her hand and trying not to cry. Then came the interview that would be played on every news channel in America. Tell me what happened, Jake said. Camera rolling. Maria took a very shaky breath. Emma is a good kid, a great student, and never complains. But 3 weeks ago, she told me she was so hungry that her stomach hurt all the time. I told her I'd purchase groceries on Friday, which was payday, and to just hold on. She said, okay. She always says, okay. Oh, that's my Emma. She doesn't want to be a burden. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But then she started bringing food home from school, bread crusts, apple cores that other kids threw away. Once I found her eating from the trash, my daughter eating from the garbage because she was so hungry that she didn't care. The interview was broadcast that night at 6:00 p.m., and by 7 p.m. it had been shared 50,000 times on social media. By midnight, it had reached 8 million views, and by the morning, every major network was covering the story. But Jake Morrison did not stop with that single interview. He began to investigate exactly where the school lunch money had gone. Federal funding for the National School Lunch Program had been slashed from $14 billion to $5.3 billion. $7 billion was simply gone, cut from the budget with a single Trump executive order signed in March. The stated reason was for fiscal responsibility and reducing childhood obesity. The actual reason, Jake would discover, was far more sinister. He followed the money trail, and what he uncovered would destroy a presidency. In New York, an investigative journalist named Sarah Chen had been working on a parallel story. Trump's casino businesses had been bleeding money for years. Trump Plaza had declared bankruptcy in 2014, and Trump Taj Mahal followed in 2016. Everyone was aware of this, as it was public record. What was not public record was what Trump had done about it. Sarah had sources in Atlantic City, people who had worked in Trump's casinos who had observed events, and who had kept quiet out of fear or loyalty but were now willing to talk. She had spent 6 months piecing together a financial trail demonstrating that Trump had been using various means to funnel money to keep his failing casinos afloat. Then she saw Jake Morrison's report about Emma Washington, about $8.7 billion cut from school lunches, and about children fainting from hunger in classrooms across America. She had a thought that seemed impossible, too monstrous and too brazen, even for Trump. She began cross-referencing dates. The school lunch cuts were announced on March 7, 2020, through an executive order signed by President Trump, which redirected Department of Agriculture funding to other priorities. On March 15th, 8 days later, Trump Casino Holdings LLC received a mysterious capital injection of $8 billion. The source was listed as federal infrastructure reallocation, the same bureaucratic language used in the school lunch cuts. Sarah made 3 phone calls, one to an accountant who specialized in federal budget forensics, one to a lawyer who understood the labyrinth of Trump's shell companies, and one to her source at the Treasury Department, who had been feeding her information for years, always anonymously and always carefully. After the third call, Sarah sat at her desk and stared at her computer screen for 5 full minutes. Then she picked up the phone and called Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's office. "I need to speak to the Congresswoman immediately," she said. "I have evidence that President Trump stole $8.7 billion from school lunch programs to pay his casino debts, and I can prove it." Crockett's chief of staff, Marcus Williams, had learned to recognize the tone of voice that meant a story was real, not a conspiracy theory or a partisan hit job, but the documented, provable truth. "Can you be in Washington tomorrow?" he inquired. "I'm already packing," Sarah replied. The meeting took place in Crockett's office at 7 a.m. the next morning. In attendance were Crockett, Marcus Williams, Sarah Chen, and Jake Morrison, who had been flown in from Virginia overnight, and 3 members of the House Oversight Committee. Sarah spread documents across the conference table, similar to a poker player revealing a royal flush. On March 7th, President Trump signed an executive order cutting $8.7 billion from the National School Lunch Program. The stated purpose was for fiscal responsibility and redirecting funds to other vital programs. She pulled out another document. This is the actual executive order, Section 4, subsection B, authorization for Department of Agriculture emergency reallocation to address urgent federal obligations. That phrase, urgent federal obligations, appears nowhere else in federal budget documents. It was created specifically for this order. She produced a thick stack of bank records. On March 15th, 8 days after the cuts were announced, Trump Casino Holdings LLC received a wire transfer of $8 billion from an entity called the Federal Agricultural Emergency Fund. That entity was created on March 8th, the day after the school lunch cuts were announced. It existed for exactly 3 weeks, just long enough to process one transfer, and then it was dissolved. "Where did the money go?" Crockett asked, though she already knew the devastating answer. Trump Plaza Atlantic City, which was about to be seized by creditors, Trump Taj Mahal, which owed $400 million to contractors, and Trump Casino Holdings LLC, which had $600 million in personal loan guarantees that Trump had made. The money was divided among these entities, paid off Trump's gambling debts, and kept his casino empire from complete collapse. She pulled out one more document, and this one made everyone in the room inhale sharply. This is an internal memo from the Trump Organization dated March 4th, 3 days before the school lunch cuts were announced. It's from Donald Trump Jr. to the president. Quote, "Dad, the casino situation is critical. We're going to lose everything if we don't find capital in the next 2 weeks. The banks won't extend credit, and private investors won't return calls. We need at least $8 billion to survive. Can we tap federal discretionary funds? You have budget authority. Nobody reads the agriculture stuff anyway." End quote. Crockett read the memo 3 times, and each time the words seemed more damning. She asked about the president's response. Sarah produced another document, an email from Trump's personal assistant sent on Trump's behalf. Quote, "This is what we're doing. USDA has billions in the school lunch program. Those kids are overweight anyway, so cut it. Use the authority you have, make it happen, and move the money quietly. By the time anyone notices, we'll be solvent and I'll be out of office. Nobody's going to investigate a president for trying to improve agriculture efficiency." End quote. The room was silent. Jake Morrison broke it. "I've interviewed 19 families in the Arlington area alone, 19 children who've been hospitalized for malnutrition in the past 6 months. That's one school district. Extrapolate that nationally, and we're looking at thousands of kids, maybe tens of thousands." He pulled out his phone and played a video of Emma Washington in her hospital bed, looking tiny and fragile with IV lines running into both arms. "This is what $8 billion looks like, Mr. President," he said to the empty air. "This is what you bought with your casino bailout, starving children." Crockett closed the folder in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but everyone in the room recognized the tone. It was the voice she used right before she destroyed someone. "We're going to need more evidence: bank records, wire transfers, emails, internal memos, testimony from Trump Organization employees, Treasury records, everything. Build the case airtight, because we're not just impeaching him for this, we're putting him in prison." She looked at Sarah. "Can you get me everything? Every document, every source, every thread?" Sarah nodded. "I've been building this file for 6 months. I have testimony from 4 Trump Organization employees who will go on record. I have the complete financial trail. I have the proof." "Then let's go to work," Crockett said. Over the next 3 weeks, they built the most comprehensive case of presidential corruption in American history, consisting of 963 pages of evidence. Bank records showed the exact path of $8 billion from USDA accounts to Trump casino holdings. Emails between Trump family members discussed the scheme, and internal memos from Treasury officials raising red flags that were ignored. There was also so much testimony, including testimony from Trump Organization accountants who had processed the transfers, USDA officials who had been ordered to authorize the reallocation, and Treasury analysts who had noticed the irregularities but were told to stay quiet. Testimony also came from casino employees who had seen the money arrive and knew where it came from, school cafeteria workers who had watched portions shrink and children go hungry, and the families. Maria Washington and Emma were not alone. 46 other families whose children had been hospitalized came forward, along with hundreds more whose children were suffering but had not yet collapsed. All of them shared the same story: their children were hungry, their children were failing in school, and their children were stealing food, hoarding scraps, and eating from trash cans. This suffering was because the president had stolen their lunch money to save his casino empire. On November 28, 2025, Crockett held a press conference. She announced, "In 3 days, President Trump will appear before a nationally televised town hall on education policy and child nutrition. He has stated that the reductions in school lunch funding were necessary fiscal adjustments that have not harmed children, and he has called reports of childhood malnutrition fake news and Democratic propaganda." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "I will be presenting evidence at that town hall. 963 pages of documented proof that President Trump stole $8.7 billion from school lunch programs to pay his personal casino debts. I will show bank records, wire transfers, and internal memos." Another pause, longer this time. "And I will ask him one simple question. If school lunches are still adequate, and if children are not suffering, then he should have no problem eating what they eat for 1 week. I challenge President Trump to eat only what American school children are served for lunch. No steaks from Mar-a-Lago, no McDonald's delivered to Air Force One, just the food that children in underfunded schools eat every single day." She leaned forward, her voice hardening. "If it's good enough for America's children, it's good enough for America's president. Unless he's been lying about what he's done to them, unless he knows exactly how terrible the food has become, and unless he understands that he's starving children to save his casinos and simply doesn't care." Press conference ended and the challenge went viral within minutes. Trump responded 3 hours later on Truth Social with the following statement. Quote, "Crooked Crockett is lying as usual. School lunches are better than ever, beautiful lunches, the best lunches anyone has ever seen. I'd be happy to eat school lunch, but I'm too busy being president to play her stupid games. The fake news media is trying to distort my brilliant agricultural reforms. Everyone knows kids today are overweight. I'm helping them be healthy. Parents are thanking me with tears in their eyes. Typical Democrat witch hunt. Sad." End quote. Crockett responded immediately. "Then prove it. Come to the town hall. Answer the questions. Show America you're telling the truth, unless you're afraid of a few questions and a black portfolio full of evidence." The country held its breath. Trump could not back down without looking weak, but he also could not face what Crockett had prepared. He did what he always did when trapped. He attacked. Quote, "Find Hittite," he tweeted. "I'll be at the fake town hall. I'll expose Crockett's lies and show America what a real president looks like. She's going to be so embarrassed. I'm bringing my own experts and my own evidence, and we're going to destroy her fake narrative. This will be the greatest town hall performance in history. Everyone will see how much I've done for children, the best child nutrition program ever, believe me." End quote. As the town hall was scheduled for December 1st, 2025, and PBS NewsHour would host it at McKinley High School in Arlington, Virginia. This was the same district where Emma Washington had collapsed, and the same school cafeteria where children were eating the food that Trump claimed was adequate. 67 million Americans cleared their schedules to watch the event, having no idea they were about to witness the end of a presidency. At 6:00 p.m. on that day, McKinley High School's cafeteria had been transformed for the town hall, with 500 folding chairs arranged in rows. A stage featured two podiums exactly 12 feet apart, a distance negotiated by competing legal teams. Banks of television cameras were positioned along the back wall, and reporters were crammed into a designated press section. Everywhere there were parents who had watched their children come home hungry, who had seen grades drop, energy fade, and health deteriorate. These were parents who had been told by their government that everything was fine while their children suffered. The cafeteria workers had been asked to prepare a display. 2 lunch trays sat on a table at the front of the room, covered with clear plastic wrap. Tray number 1 showed what school lunch looked like in 2024 before the cuts. This consisted of a turkey sandwich on wheat bread, carrot sticks with ranch dip, an apple, a carton of milk, and a chocolate chip cookie. It was not gourmet, but it was substantial, nutritious enough to sustain a growing child through an afternoon of learning. Tray number 2 showed what school lunch looked like now after $8.7 billion in cuts. This consisted of 3 chicken nuggets that appeared gray and rubbery, a spoonful of canned corn that was watery and pale, 2 stale crackers, and a juice box. The juice box was the cheap kind that is mostly water and sugar. The total cost was 87 cents, and the total calories were approximately 400. This was served to children who required 1,800 to 2,000 calories per day. Patricia Rodriguez had worked in McKinley's cafeteria for 14 years. She knew every child's name, their favorite foods, their allergies, and their stories, having watched them grow from kindergartners to high schoolers. She had celebrated their birthdays, consoled them through bad days, and ensured that picky eaters got something they would actually consume. She had loved her job before the cuts turned her from someone who nourished children into someone who watched them go hungry. On this night, Patricia stood in the corner of the cafeteria wearing her standard-issue hairnet and apron, clutching a folder that contained 14 years' worth of notes. She had documented everything: the quantities of food she had been ordered to reduce, the complaints from children, and the names of the kids who had fainted. She also noted the ones who had stolen food and the ones who had cried because their stomachs hurt. She had been told not to keep these records, as her supervisor had warned her that documenting problems could be seen as insubordination, disloyalty, or stirring up trouble. She had kept them anyway because someone needed to remember and bear witness. Tonight, she would testify. Judy Woodruff took the stage first, her silver hair perfect under the harsh television lights, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes betraying the gravity of what was about to unfold. At 78, she had moderated more political events than almost anyone alive, having interviewed presidents, covered scandals, and witnessed history being made and unmade. But tonight felt different, as if this was something that could not be spun, softened, or explained away. Tonight, the evidence would speak for itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "welcome to this PBS NewsHour Town Hall on Child Nutrition and Education Policy. The question before us tonight is simple. In March of this year, President Trump signed an executive order that reduced federal funding for the National School Lunch Program by $8.7 billion. The administration has stated that these reductions were fiscally necessary and have not negatively impacted children's nutrition or well-being. Critics, including Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, allege that these cuts have caused widespread childhood malnutrition and that the diverted funds were misappropriated. Tonight, we will examine the evidence. She gestured to stage right. Mr. President, thank you for joining us. Trump entered through the east doors, surrounded by his Secret Service and trailing aides, resembling a comet with a tail of yes men. He wore his standard uniform of a red tie that was too long, a dark suit, an American flag pin, and orange makeup that looked even more unnatural under the TV lights. He walked with his signature forward lean, chest out and arms swinging, displaying the body language of someone who had never known doubt. The applause was scattered and perfunctory, as these were not his people but parents who had watched their children suffer. They clapped because politeness demanded it, not because they felt it. Trump waved anyway, both arms raised in his touchdown gesture as if the room had erupted in adoration. In his mind, perhaps it had. Reality and Trump's perception of reality had parted ways long ago. And joining us to present the opposition perspective, Woodruff continued, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who serves on the House Oversight Committee and has been investigating the reallocation of school lunch funding. Crockett entered from the West Side, and the contrast could not have been starker. Where Trump bulldozed, she glided, and where he demanded attention, she commanded it. She wore a charcoal pantsuit, a white blouse, and the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. She carried the same black leather portfolio that had destroyed Trump at the Flint Town Hall. The parents recognized it, and gasps rippled through the audience. Phones came out, and within seconds, Twitter was exploding with hashtags like "had the black portfolio," "she has the receipts," and "cash Trump's done." The portfolio appeared even heavier than before, 16 inches wide and 6 inches thick, secured with brass clasps that caught the light. Two aides helped her carry it to the podium, and the sound it made when she set it down echoed through the cafeteria like a judge's gavel. 963 pages, someone in the press section whispered. Someone else had already counted them. The rumors had been flying for days that the evidence was comprehensive, the case airtight, and that Trump was walking into an ambush. Trump seemed not to notice, or perhaps not to care, as he was checking his hair in the reflection of a camera lens, adjusting his tie and looking supremely confident. After all, he had survived scandals that would have destroyed any other politician, including the Mueller investigation, 2 impeachments, January 6th, and the Flint water crisis, which had barely dented him. In some circles, how much damage could school lunch cuts really do? He was about to find out. Woodruff began, Mr. President, let's start with the basic facts. On March 7th, you signed Executive Order 14492, which reduced USDA funding for the National School Lunch Program by $8.7 billion. Can you explain the reasoning behind this decision? Trump's hands rose, already sculpting invisible magnificence from empty air. Judy, first of all, that characterization is completely wrong. We didn't cut anything. We reallocated. We moved money from areas of waste and inefficiency to areas where it could do more good. The school lunch program had become bloated, corrupt, and frankly was making our kids overweight. Have you seen American children lately? They're huge, the biggest children in the world. It's a health crisis. He was warming up now, finding his rhythm. So, I said, let's be smart about this. Let's reduce portions, eliminate unnecessary items, focus on lean proteins and vegetables, and make America's children healthy again. It's the same thing I did in business, cutting waste, increasing efficiency, and you know what? Parents are thanking me everywhere I go. Parents come up to me with tears in their eyes and they say, Sir, thank you for making my child healthier. Thank you for caring about childhood obesity. Many such cases. In the third row, Maria Washington was gripping her daughter Emma's hands so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Emma, still pale and thin from her hospitalization 3 weeks ago, stared at Trump with the uncomprehending expression of someone hearing lies so brazen they defied reality. Woodruff turned to Crockett. Congresswoman, your response? Crockett set down the pen she had been holding, and the click of metal on wood somehow carried weight and finality. It was the sound of a trap about to spring. Thank you, Judy. Mr. President, you've made several claims that I'd like to address with evidence rather than rhetoric. You said you reallocated funds to areas where they could do more good. Let's examine where those funds actually went. She opened the portfolio, and the brass clasp sounded like a shotgun being loaded. On March 7th, you signed Executive Order 14492. On March 8th, one day later, an entity called the Federal Agricultural Emergency Fund was incorporated in Delaware. This entity had no employees, no office, no website, and no apparent purpose except to exist on paper. She produced the incorporation documents, holding them up for the cameras. On March 15th, 8 days after your executive order, the Federal Agricultural Emergency Fund received a wire transfer of $8 billion from the USDA's Child Nutrition account. That same day, the Federal Agricultural Emergency Fund transferred $8 billion to 3 recipients. She produced bank statements enlarged on poster board. Trump Casino Holdings LLC received $3.2 billion. Trump Plaza Atlantic City received a $2.8 billion. Trump Taj Mahal Properties received $2 billion. All companies owned wholly or partially by you, Mr. President. All companies that were, according to public financial records, within weeks of bankruptcy. The cafeteria erupted with shouts and gasps, and one woman screamed. Security moved toward the aisles, but Woodruff raised her hand, keeping them back. That's a complete lie. Trump's voice had lost its casual confidence, replaced by the sharp edge of panic. Those are fake documents, photoshopped, probably made in China. Crockett's voice was quiet, but it cut through his shouting like a scalpel through skin. These are certified bank records obtained through congressional subpoena. They have been authenticated by 3 independent forensic accountants. The Treasury Department, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve have all verified their accuracy. Would you like to accuse all of them of forgery? Trump opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer was frantically signaling from the front row, "Say nothing, invoke executive privilege, walk out." But Trump could not walk out, as his ego would not allow it. Walking out would look weak. So he did what he always did when cornered. He attacked. Those companies needed capital for legitimate business purposes. That's what businesses do. They get capital. It's called capitalism. Maybe you should learn about it instead of pushing your socialist agenda. Crockett interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm. Mr. President, let me read you something. This is an email from your son, Donald Trump Jr., to you, dated March 4th, 3 days before you signed the executive order cutting school lunch funding. She produced the email, enlarged so the cameras could capture every word. Quote, "Dad, the casino situation is critical. We're going to lose everything if we don't find capital in the next 2 weeks. The banks won't extend credit, and private investors won't return calls. We need at least $8 billion to survive. Can we tap federal discretionary funds? You have budget authority. Nobody reads the agriculture stuff anyway." End quote. She looked up from the email, her eyes finding Trump's. "And your response, sent through your personal assistant on March 5th, quote, this is what we're doing. USDA has billions in the school lunch program. Those kids are overweight anyway, so cut it. Use the authority you have, make it happen, and move the money quietly. By the time anyone notices, we'll be solvent and I'll be out of office. Nobody's going to investigate a president for trying to improve agriculture efficiency." End quote. Shite. The silence in the cafeteria was absolute. 500 people were barely breathing, and 67 million Americans watching from home were frozen in front of their screens. "That email is fake, completely fabricated," Trump yelled. "I never said those kids are overweight anyway. Someone made that up to frame me." Crockett stated, "This email was retrieved from White House servers with proper legal authority. The metadata shows it was sent from your personal assistant's official email account at the exact time and date indicated. We have testimony from 4 White House staffers who were copied on this email chain, and we have the IT log showing when it was sent, received, and read. This email is real." She pulled out another document. "But perhaps you'd prefer we discuss the impact of your decision rather than the evidence of your crime. Let's talk about what happened to children after you stole their lunch money." She nodded to her aides, who wheeled out a large presentation board featuring a graph. Crockett didn't just point to it, She read every detail out loud, her voice steady as a metronome. In the 6 months before your executive order, January to June 2024, there were 14 reported cases nationwide of children being hospitalized for malnutrition-related issues. 14 cases in 6 months across all 50 states, not zero, but relatively rare. She paused to let that baseline sink in. In the 6 months after your executive order, March to September 2025, there were 2,047 reported cases of children being hospitalized for malnutrition. 2,847. That is a 20,000% increase. She produced a thick folder. Medical records with patient information redacted but diagnosis visible. These children presented with severe malnutrition, dehydration, anemia, vitamin deficiencies, and in some cases organ damage from prolonged starvation. The average age was 9.3 years old. The average weight loss was 18% of body weight. 18%, Mr. President. These children were wasting away while you saved your casinos. Trump's face had gone from orange to red, then to an alarming shade of purple. Those numbers are inflated, exaggerated. Doctors lie for Democrats all the time. Everyone knows that. Crockett asked, her voice remaining quiet but with steel underneath now. Would you like to meet some of these children? Would you like to hear what they have to say about your agricultural efficiency? She gestured to the audience. Maria Washington, would you and Emma please come to the stage? Maria stood, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. Emma rose beside her, looking tiny and fragile in her oversized sweater, which hung on her like a shroud. They walked to the stage hand in hand, and the television cameras captured every step. This was the mother who worked 2 jobs and still could not feed her children, and the daughter who had collapsed in math class from hunger. They climbed the steps carefully, Emma moving with the caution of someone whose body had betrayed her once and might do so again. Crockett met them at the top, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. Emma, she said gently, can you tell the president what happened to you? Emma looked at Trump, her eyes huge in her thin face. She did not have Marcus's cognitive damage, but she had something else, the haunted expression of a child who had learned that adults could not be trusted to keep them safe. I got really hungry, she said. Her voice was small but clear, and the microphone picked up every word. At school, they used to give us good lunches, turkey sandwiches, apples, and milk. But then the food got bad and there was less of it. Just chicken nuggets that taste like cardboard and corn that's all mushy. Her voice trembled, but she continued. I tried to eat it anyway, but it made me feel sick. Some kids threw up after eating it, so I stopped eating it. But then I got so hungry I couldn't think. I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't pay attention in class. My stomach hurt all the time. Tears were streaming down her face now. I tried to eat food from the trash because I was so hungry. I found apple cores and bread crusts that other kids threw away. But Mommy caught me and she cried. She cried so hard I felt bad for making Mommy cry, but I was just so hungry. She looked back at Trump. Why did you take our lunch money? Don't you have enough money already? Why did you make us hungry? Trump stared at her, his mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds passed. Crockett said, Mr. President, Emma asked you a question. Why did you take the lunch money from hungry children to save your failing casinos? 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 25 seconds of silence followed. The cameras were locked on Trump's face. In living rooms across America, people were counting, and on social media, the hashtag started immediately. Number 61 seconds. That was how long Trump would ultimately stand there silent, unable to answer a starving child's simple question. 30 seconds, 35 seconds, 40 seconds went by. This is a setup, Trump finally said, his voice strained. This child, I don't know who she is, but this is obviously coached. Democrats probably paid her family to make up this story. Everyone knows school lunches are fine, better than fine, the best lunches in the world. Emma recoiled as if slapped. I'm not lying. I was in the hospital. I have what's it called, Mommy? Medical records, Maria said, her voice shaking with rage. She has medical records, test results, doctor's notes, all of it documented. My daughter nearly died from starvation, and you're calling her a liar. The cafeteria exploded. Parents were on their feet shouting. Security was moving toward the stage. Trump's aides were trying to pull him toward the exit, but Crockett was not finished. Mr. President, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, you claim that school lunches are fine, better than fine, the best lunches in the world. I have a simple challenge for you. She walked to the table where the two lunch trays sat. This tray, she said, pointing to tray number 1, shows what school lunch looked like before your cuts. This tray, pointing to tray number 2, shows what it looks like now. If the current lunch is adequate, if children are not suffering, and if your claims are true, then you should have no problem eating what they eat. She picked up tray number 2 and set it in front of Trump's podium. This is today's lunch from this school's cafeteria. 3 chicken nuggets, a spoonful of canned corn, 2 crackers, and a juice box. 400 calories. 87 cents worth of food. This is what you claim is adequate nutrition for a growing child. She stepped back. Eat it, right now, on camera, in front of these parents and their children. Prove to us that this food is acceptable. Prove that you're not starving children to save your casinos. Trump stared at the tray, at the gray, rubbery nuggets, at the watery corn, and at the pathetic collection of food that would not satisfy a toddler, let alone a growing child who needed fuel for learning, playing, and growing. This is ridiculous. This is a stunt. I'm not playing Democrat games. It's not a game, Mr. President. Crockett's voice was ice. It's a challenge. You said this food is adequate. You said children are not suffering. Prove it. Eat what you force them to eat. I don't have to prove anything to you, Trump retorted. Then you're admitting you lied. You're admitting this food is inadequate. You're admitting you stole lunch money from starving children and you simply don't care. Trump's face cycled through emotions of rage, fear, and desperation. He looked at his aides, his lawyer, and the exits, but there was no escape. Every camera in the room was trained on him, and every phone was recording. 67 million Americans were watching. He did the only thing he could do, the only thing he had ever done when confronted with his cruelty. He attacked a child. Look, he said, pointing at Emma, some kids are just naturally thin. Some kids don't like to eat. You can't blame lunch programs for bad genetics or picky eaters. Maybe this girl has an eating disorder. Maybe her mother isn't feeding her at home. Did anyone investigate that? Because I'm seeing a mother who's maybe not taking care of her kid and trying to blame me for her own failures. Maria Washington lunged for the stage. It took 3 people to hold her back, and her screams were primal and incoherent. The sound of a mother hearing her child insulted by the man who had stolen her ability to feed that child. Emma burst into sobs. Crockett wrapped her arms around the little girl, shielding her from Trump, the cameras, and everything. How dare you, Crockett said, her voice quiet but carrying through the cafeteria like thunder. How dare you attack a child? How dare you blame a mother who works 16 hours a day trying to keep her family alive? How dare you deflect from what you've done? She stood still, holding Emma, and looked directly at the cameras. America, you just heard the President of the United States accuse a hospitalized child of having an eating disorder rather than admit he stole her lunch money. You just watched him attack a working mother rather than take responsibility for his crimes. You just witnessed a man who eats gold-leafed steaks and McDonald's burgers flown in on Air Force One tell hungry children that the scraps he's left them are adequate. She paused to let that image sink in. This is who he is. This is who he's always been. A man who takes from the weak to enrich himself, a man who blames children for starving while he gambles away their lunch money, and a man who, when confronted with evidence of his cruelty, attacks those he's hurt rather than accepting responsibility. Trump was backing toward the stage exit, his aides finally succeeding in pulling him away, but his microphone was still live, and America was about to hear exactly what he thought of them. Trump stormed off the stage, his face purple with rage, with his aides flanking him like bodyguards extracting a mob boss from a crime scene. Behind him, Emma Washington was still sobbing in Crockett's arms, and Maria was being restrained by security, screaming words that would be bleeped from the broadcast, but would live forever in the raw footage that leaked online. In the production booth, audio engineer Marcus Rivera had his hand hovering over the control board, ready to cut Trump's microphone the moment he left the stage. This was standard procedure. The subject leaves, you cut the feed. But something made him pause. Maybe it was Emma's tears, or the memory of his own daughter coming home hungry from school last year, or the $8.7 billion that had disappeared while children starved. Whatever the reason, Marcus's hand did not move, and the microphone stayed live. Trump's voice, still broadcasting through the PA system, echoed through the cafeteria. His aides were trying to get him to be quiet and to wait until they were clear of the building, but Trump never could shut up when he was angry. That terrible woman, did you see what she did? Set me up with that crying kid, probably gave her something to make her look sick. These people are despicable, just disgusting. I should have her arrested for assaulting the president with fake accusations. Sir, your mic, one aide tried to intervene. I don't care about the microphone. I want that woman destroyed. And that cafeteria worker, the one with the folder, find out who paid her. Follow the money. She's probably on some Democrat payroll. Nobody keeps records for 14 years unless they're planning a setup. They were in the hallway now, heading toward the exit. The cafeteria had gone completely silent, with everyone listening in horror and fascination as Trump's unfiltered thoughts poured out. And that kid, what's her name, Emma? She's probably fine, probably eating McDonald's every night on her mother's food stamps, and they're trying to blame me for it. You want to know the truth? These people have too many kids they can't afford to feed, and then they expect taxpayers to pick up the tab. Well, not on my watch. My casinos generate jobs, they generate revenue. Some kid in Virginia doesn't generate anything except welfare claims and sob stories. Sir, we're almost to the car, please. I'm talking, don't interrupt me. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to audit every family that claims their kid is hungry. Bet you anything we find fraud, food stamp fraud, welfare fraud. These people are scammers, professional victims, and the fake news media eats it up because they hate me. They've always hated me. The door slammed shut, and Marine One's rotors were already spinning. In the cafeteria, 500 people sat in stunned silence. The PA system had broadcast every word, every slur, every admission, and every piece of evidence that the President of the United States viewed hungry children as inconvenient liars and their struggling parents as frauds. Marcus Rivera, still in the production booth, had recorded it all. Social media exploded instantly, with the phrase about not caring about the microphone trending worldwide within 47 seconds. The mention of professional victims reached 1 million mentions in 3 minutes. The clip of Trump saying these people have too many kids they cannot afford to feed was shared 4.3 million times in the first 10 minutes. By midnight, it had been viewed 160 million times. News channels did not know what to do. CNN played the audio once, then spent 3 hours with various experts trying to contextualize what they had just heard. MSNBC ran it uncensored with a warning, and even Fox News struggled to respond. Sean Hannity came on air looking shaken. I've defended this president through everything, he said slowly. Everything. But what we just heard, calling American families despicable, calling hungry children welfare claims and sob stories, I need some time to process this. He looked directly at the camera. If you have kids, imagine someone saying that about your family. If you've ever struggled to put food on the table, imagine the president calling you a professional victim. I'm going to take a break. We'll be right back. The show went to commercial, and Hannity did not come back. His producer announced he had been taken ill, but the truth would come out later. Hannity had walked off the set, gone to his dressing room, and cried. Even Sean Hannity had limits. The rest of the events unfolded with the speed and inevitability of dominoes falling, FBI raids on Trump Organization properties, arrests of Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and 17 executives, and subpoenas for every bank that had processed the $8 billion transfer. Testimony also came from dozens of employees who had known about the scheme and stayed quiet. Articles of impeachment were drawn up within 72 hours with simple and devastating charges: theft of federal funds, misappropriation of emergency aid, fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and child endangerment. The House vote was 423 to 12, as even Republicans could not defend stealing lunch money from children. The Senate trial lasted 2 weeks, and the prosecution played the hot mic audio 17 times. Each time the audio was played, senators winced and the words sounded worse. Professional victims have too many kids they can't afford to feed. Some kid doesn't generate anything except welfare claims. Trump testified despite his lawyers begging him not to, and claimed the audio was edited, fake, and taken out of context. The prosecution then played the full, unedited recording, all 9 minutes of it, including the parts where Trump instructed his aides to investigate Emma's family for fraud and ordered opposition research on Crockett. The cross-examination lasted 40 minutes, and Crockett asked one question 17 different ways. Did you take $8 billion from school lunch programs to pay your casino debts? Trump's answers ranged from, I don't recall, to, that's not how business works, to, you're putting words in my mouth, to, are we done yet? The Senate voted 94-6 to convict him. The criminal trial that followed was even faster. Federal prosecutors in New Jersey, where Trump's casinos were located, brought charges of wire fraud, theft, and child endangerment. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and the jury deliberated for 2 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge stated, Mr. Trump, you stole food from children to save your gambling empire. You called starving children liars. You called struggling parents frauds. You showed no remorse, no empathy, and no recognition that your actions harmed the most vulnerable among us. This court has seen many criminals, but I have never seen cruelty this casual, this calculated, and this complete. The sentence handed down was 45 years, which at age 79 was effectively a life sentence. Trump was taken to the Federal Correctional Institution at Fort Dix, New Jersey, a medium security facility with no special treatment, no Twitter, no golf, and no gold-plated anything. He was given just a cell, a cot, and a meal tray that held exactly what he had refused to eat at the town hall: 3 chicken nuggets, canned corn, 2 crackers, and a juice box. The warden, a veteran corrections officer with 30 years of experience, possessed a sense of poetic justice. The restoration of the school lunch program occurred faster than anyone expected, with the $8 billion recovered and returned, plus an additional $12 billion in emergency appropriations. Within 6 months, school cafeterias across America were serving meals that actually fed children. Patricia Rodriguez, the cafeteria worker who had kept 14 years of records, was promoted to regional nutrition director. She oversaw the implementation of new standards to ensure every child would get adequate calories, fresh fruits and vegetables, protein, and milk. There would be no more starvation rations and no more choosing between education and nutrition. On the first day of the new program, Patricia stood in McKinley High School's cafeteria and watched children's faces light up when they saw the food: turkey sandwiches, apples, carrots with ranch, cookies, and milk. An 11-year-old boy looked at his tray in wonder and asked, "Is this really for us?" "All of it," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. "Every single day. You deserve to be fed. You deserve to learn. You deserve to grow." Emma Washington returned to school 3 months after the trial, having regained the weight she had lost, plus a few pounds. Her cheeks were rosy again, her energy had returned, and she was reading at grade level, participating in class and joining the school choir. On her first day back, the cafeteria staff had made her a special tray consisting of a turkey sandwich with extra meat, 2 apples, a carton of chocolate milk, and 3 cookies. "We missed you," Patricia told her. "We're so glad you're back." Emma looked at the tray, then at Patricia, and burst into tears, saying, "Happy tears this time. Thank you. Thank you for not forgetting us." Maria Washington, who had been working 16-hour days just to keep her family fed, was able to cut back to 1 full-time job. The children were eating at school, the house payment got easier, and the stress that had been crushing her slowly lifted. She framed a newspaper article about the trial and hung it in their kitchen. The headline read, "Justice for Hungry Children." Below it was a photo of Crockett holding Emma at the town hall, protecting her from Trump's attacks. Underneath the photo, Maria had written in marker, "Never forget who fought for us when we couldn't fight for ourselves." Jasmine Crockett was named Time magazine's Person of the Year, but she declined most interview requests, did not write a book, and did not do the paid speaking circuit. She simply went back to work, investigating the next scandal, building the next case, and protecting the next group of vulnerable people from those who would exploit them. In her office, she kept three things: a photo of Emma Washington, healthy and smiling, taken at a school assembly 6 months after the trial, a copy of the lunch tray menu from before Trump's cuts, and a copy of the lunch tray menu from after the restoration. When young staffers asked her about the school lunch case, she would point to those three items. This is why we do the work, not for headlines or glory, but for that little girl who can eat lunch again, for every child who deserves to learn without hunger gnawing at their stomach, for every parent who shouldn't have to choose between rent and feeding their kids. She would pick up the post-restoration menu. This is what America can be when we demand better, when we hold power accountable, and when we choose children over casinos, nutrition over greed, and justice over profit. And then she would get back to work because there was always another case, another injustice, and another battle to fight. In prison, Trump told anyone who would listen that he had been framed, that the trial was rigged, that the children were crisis actors, and that he was the real victim. Nobody listened, not even the other inmates, as they had children, grandchildren, nephews, and nieces whom they loved and who depended on school meals. One day in the cafeteria, an inmate who had worked as a short-order cook before his incarceration looked at Trump's tray consisting of 3 chicken nuggets, canned corn, 2 crackers, and a juice box. "How's the food?" the inmate asked. "Terrible," Trump muttered. "Barely edible. I can't believe they expect people to survive on this garbage." The inmate smiled without humor. "That's what school kids ate while you gambled their lunch money. How's it feel?" Trump had no answer, as he never did. 5 years after the trial, McKinley High School unveiled a memorial in the cafeteria, a bronze plaque mounted on the wall near where the town hall had taken place. It read, "In memory of all the children who went hungry, in honor of those who fought to feed them. November 2025, December 2025, the 61 seconds that changed America." Below the plaque was a photo of Emma Washington at age 11, thin and hollow-eyed, standing next to a photo of Emma at age 16, healthy and strong, wearing her high school volleyball uniform. The transformation told the whole story. On the 5-year anniversary of the town hall, Emma gave a speech at a school assembly. "5 years ago, I passed out from hunger in my math class. I was so weak I couldn't stand up, so empty I couldn't think. I was dying, and I didn't even understand why. All I knew was that my stomach hurt, and nobody seemed to care." She paused, looking at the cafeteria full of students eating healthy lunches. But people did care. Congresswoman Crockett cared, Mrs. Rodriguez cared, my mom cared, and when they fought for us, America listened. Not because we were important or powerful or rich, but because we were kids. Because even in a country that sometimes forgets its values, most people still believe that children deserve to eat. She smiled. "I'm 16 now. I'm healthy, I'm on the honor roll, I'm playing volleyball and singing in choir, and I'm planning to go to college. I have a future because people fought for my lunch." It sounds silly when you say it like that, but it's true. My future existed in those school meals, in that turkey sandwich and that apple and that carton of milk. Her voice grew stronger. "So to every kid here, remember this. Your lunch isn't just food. It's someone saying you matter, you're worth feeding, you're worth investing in, and you're worth fighting for. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Don't ever let anyone steal from you and call it reform. And if they try, you speak up, just like my mom and Mrs. Rodriguez and Congresswoman Crockett taught us. You speak truth to power no matter how scared you are." The assembly erupted in applause. Emma stood there, no longer the hollow-eyed child in a hospital bed, but a strong young woman who had survived and thrived. In Washington, Jasmine Crockett watched the video of Emma's speech. When it finished, she wiped her eyes and got back to work because there were still battles to fight, still injustices to expose, and still children who needed someone to carry a black portfolio full of evidence and ask the questions that those in power did not want to answer. The work was never done, but on this day, in this moment, Emma Washington had her future back, and that was worth everything.